Why people don't change. Jung's brutal truth. There is a question the psyche avoids like fire. If you truly wanted to change, why haven't you? Not in slogans, not in the way you introduce yourself at dinner parties, but in the closed, unlit corridors of your life, where you repeat what you swore you'd never repeat. You know the places. The argument that erupts in your chest when you see their face. The promise that dissolves the moment the door closes. The habit you call just how I am that feels older than you. Something is steering, and it isn't your bright, worded, A-light mind. Carl Jung thought the self was not a single monarch, but a city with concealed gates, a republic of moods and memories and temples and prisons. He thought that when people say, "I'll change," it is often the mayor speaking, unaware that the city is ruled by older powers. Dreams know their names. Your slips of the tongue rehearse their liturgy. They are the shadow, the unlived life, the figures you pretended were not you, and so released into the world as fate. Jung's brutal truth is not that people can't change. It is that they refuse the kind of change that would actually transform them. We crave renovation without demolition, awakening without the midnight. We want a new personality, like a new coat longer, cleaner, flattering forgetting that the personality we wear is not fabric, but scar tissue. We want to upgrade our story while keeping the same cast and the same quiet tyrant backstage. The psyche does not accept these terms. What we call stuck is the victorious resistance of an inner arrangement that keeps us safe, numb, predictable. Better the familiar wound than the unknown wilderness. Better to live in a cramped room with our familiar furnishings than to step into a forest where the path has never been walked by us. Jung observed that the conscious ego is like a small island floating on a vast sea of unconscious currents. You can build a lighthouse, give speeches to the waves, and schedule a meeting about the tide. None of that changes the moon. The profound patterns of your life rise and fall in response to forces you cannot name until you make them visible. Until then, you call them coincidence, bad luck, other people's faults. You call them your type, your fate. You find language that allows you to make peace with the loop. You add a clever line. That's just my attachment style. I'm not a morning person. Chaos follows me. The words soothe the ego. The sea is unmoved. We don't change because we don't know who or what benefits from our not changing. There is a certain loyalty in us to the older contract. Childhood is a negotiation written in weathered ink. The family writes it, culture signs it, and the little self agrees. I will be the good one, the funny one, the caretaker, the ghost. I will not frighten anyone with my power. I will not burden anyone with my sadness. I will turn my anger into charm. I will pay with my body for the peace of this house. These vows become a life. They harden into a face the world applauds. Jung called this the persona, the mask that lets us trade with society. Useful, necessary, praised. But a mask that refuses to be removed starts to fuse to the skin. The shadow, meanwhile, grows patient. It is not the evil twin. It is everything we never permitted ourselves to be. Our intelligence that looks like arrogance. Our sensuality that looks like danger. Our ambition that looks like betrayal. It accumulates in secrecy, becomes heavy, and because psyche is movement, not stone, finds a way to move. Where? Into our dreams first, where the unwanted runs free. Then into our projections, where we accuse others of carrying traits we cannot bear in ourselves. That boss is controlling. That friend is dramatic. That stranger is indecent. The world becomes a mirror maze in which every accusing finger points home. This is a frightening idea if you cling to the notion that you are a single, simple, transparent soul. It becomes liberating if you realize the problem was never them. It was your refusal to hold a larger version of yourself. The reason people don't change is not because they lack information. If knowledge were enough, every addict would be free by Thursday. The reason, Jung would say, is that they mistake the symptom for the enemy, and the enemy for the guardian. They try to rip the bars from the window without noticing that the prison is also protection. Neurosis, he suggested, is the mind's way of avoiding a legitimate grief. It is a substitute pain, a circuit of agitation we choose, because it is known over the more terrible sorrow we have kept hidden from ourselves. The loss of an imagined childhood, the loss of love that never came, the loss of an identity that was never truly ours. We will do almost anything to avoid that honest encounter. We will let our lives sound like a fire alarm for decades, so long as we don't have to enter the burning room. There is another reason we don't change. To do so would make us strangers in our own lives. If you admit the truth you have long kept in your mouth unsaid, the air rearranges. The people who loved your mask might not love your face. The roles you mastered evaporate, and the stage goes dark. Even your pleasures, the ones that survived only because they were secret, beg for daylight and risked the scrutiny you spent years avoiding. Change of that magnitude is not a new habit. It is an initiation. In old stories, initiations demand blood, disorientation, and the willingness to enter a forest alone. We have anesthetized ourselves against the forest. We prefer self-help that promises the sparkle without the ash. Jung's harsh gift is to say, the ash is the point. The descent is the only passage. If your life feels built of repeating corridors, it is not because the house must be destroyed. It is because you refuse to open the locked room. There are names on those doors: father, mother, fear, ecstasy, rage, faith. If you avoid them, you will turn your back on your own house and call the world haunted. If you open them, the hauntings begin to speak. The figures in your dreams are not nightmares to be banished, but citizens demanding representation. How do you change? You give them a vote. You don't have to believe in archetypes to see them. Sit quietly and watch the faces inside you appear. The critic, the lover, the wounded child, the hunter, the monk. They aren't meteorological moods. They are patterned energies older than your biography, guiding your behavior without asking permission. You think you chose your partner. A complex whispers, choose the one who will replay the argument you know by heart. You think you chose your job. Another complex murmurs, choose the role that keeps you admired and invisible. Until those patterns walk into your consciousness and reveal their names, they will conduct your steps and call it intuition. This is why people don't change, because to truly change means to invite the very forces you've spent your life avoiding to sit at your table and eat with you. It means to face the truth that the villain in your story is not out there in the city lights, but in the basement, polishing your trophies and planning your next move. Jung did not offer comfort. He offered a lamp. He held it low, at the level of your feet, and said, there is a stair here, and that is the only way down. You can live on the roof until you die, calling the wind your enemy. Or you can descend into the house and ask who lives there. If that sounds terrifying, it is. If it sounds like anything less than losing a life and gaining a larger one, it isn't change. Call it growth, if you like. The psyche does not care for your words. It recognizes an event by its heat. Change burns, not because you are being punished, but because the frost that has preserved you has to melt, and melting is messy. It is supposed to be. Stop waiting for the day when it won't hurt. Start noticing the days when the pain feels honest. That is how Jung would begin the conversation. And he would tell you, with his dry, radical humor, that what you most fear stands guard over what you most want. You wanted a secret to change. Here it is, hiding in a plain phrase. You do not control what you do not consciously know. Everything else is superstition. Make it known, and the ghost becomes a neighbor. Refuse, and your life will be written in invisible ink you cannot read, but can't stop acting out. The choice is brutal because it is simple. The psyche will not accept substitutes. It demands a life-wide humility. It asks you to stop pretending. It asks you to be born, this time on purpose. Imagine a woman who keeps falling in love with men who leave. She says she wants stability. She says she knows her worth now. And then, summer after summer, she finds herself at a window watching another car vanish into the dawn. Imagine a man who cannot stop rescuing people. He is kind, beloved, exhausted, resentful, surrounded by those who need him and privately furious at their need. Imagine an artist who cannot begin, a professional who cannot stop working, a dreamer who never moves. Each has a story that explains it. Each has a history that defends it. None of that makes it less of a possession. Jung used the word complex to describe a cluster of charged thoughts, images, and emotions that accumulate around a theme mother: father, success, power, sex, God. A complex is not a theory in your head. It is a living thing that seizes you. It lights you up. You find yourself turning into someone you swore you'd never be, and the best you can do is narrate it. I don't know what came over me. The answer is a complex came over you. To have a complex is to have a knot in the rope of the psyche. To be had by a complex is to forget you are holding the rope at all. Complexes are not invented on a Tuesday. They are the condensation of feeling and memory at moments when you were too young to bear the full force of what was happening. So the psyche did something brilliant. It organized a defense. It said, we will survive by becoming indispensable. Or, we will survive by anticipating abandonment. Or, we will survive by feeling nothing at all. The defense worked. You lived. And then, as adults, we mistake the defense for our character. We call it our nature. Meanwhile, the world obligingly presents us with opportunities to reenact the old drama, because the drama is the only script we recognize. This is the slow machinery behind what looks like bad luck. It's why the same arguments wear different faces. Why new jobs teach old lessons. Why the project you thought would save you collapses at step one. A pattern finds a way to find its echo. Jung did not think this was malicious fate. He thought it was the unconscious trying to complete a cycle, to finish a story that could not be finished then. If you couldn't grieve at 9, the grief will knock again at 30, at 50, wearing whatever costume it must for you to open the door. This is not cosmic cruelty. It is insistence. The psyche is tired of partial versions of you. One of Jung's most radical observations was that people will endure almost any amount of meaningless suffering to avoid a little meaningful pain. The meaningless pain is the loop, the anxiety without cause, the endless apology, the evening of numb-scrolling, the waking at 3 a.m. feeling hunted by nothing. The meaningful pain is the thing that would break you open and end the loop. The conversation you refuse to have, the confession you won't name, even in your journal, the decision that would make your life unrecognizable. The loop keeps your world intact. The break would end a small world to give you a larger one. Of course you resist. Even therapy can become an elaborate method of avoidance if it becomes a place where we talk about change instead of suffering its necessity. Jung saw this, and he refused to collude. He listened like a detective and like a priest. He asked peculiar questions about dreams, about unexpected events, about the images you draw without thinking. He thought the most important material was not your opinion of yourself, but the life that escaped your opinion, the image that appeared when your hand wandered, the slip of the tongue that reversed your sentence, the dream about the black dog looking at you as if it knew your name. He trusted that the psyche shows its cards and symbols, not arguments. He cared about masks as much as he distrusted them. A person can be trapped in a persona that once saved them. The good child, the good soldier, the good wife, the genius, the prophet, the comedian. The world rewards the mask, but every mask costs. The cost is paid by the parts of you that never got invited. For a time, they wait in the wings. Then they begin to sabotage the play. They forget their lines. They knock over the set. They ruin your opening night. You rage at your self-sabotage. They call it a revolution. The psyche cannot tolerate permanent exile. It will choose catastrophe if catastrophe finally brings everyone home. Why don't people change? Because catastrophe is frightening, and revolution begins in the street, not in the policy office. Because the parts of us we banished do not return politely. If you abandoned your anger, it will come back as rage and scandal. If you abandoned your desire, it will come back as obsession. If you abandoned your tenderness, it will come back as collapsing under a touch you cannot interpret. You don't know these visitors, but they know everything about you. Jung would say, they are you. And until you recognize them, you will blame the world for the insurrection in your own house. Consider projection, that exquisite trick of throwing our unlived qualities onto the nearest screen. The woman who can't afford her desire calls other women indecent. The man who can't afford his sensitivity calls other men weak. Whole cultures run like this. And when a culture is possessed by a giant projection, it calls the result history. Jung was not surprised that people would rather legislate against their shadow than sit down with it. He knew how threatening it is to doubt your moral superiority. He also knew that, paradoxically, this humility is the door. Once you admit that what you hate in them belongs to you, you recover a piece of yourself that was exiled to keep you acceptable. Change starts not as a victory chant, but as an embarrassment you couldn't control. Behind the shadow stands something even stranger to modern ears. Archetypes, the deep patterns that structure the psyche. The mother, the trickster, the old wise one, the lover, the warrior, the child. These aren't cartoons. They are blueprints of human possibility. They want expression. When they are denied in the external world, they become storms inside. That storm chooses your partner. That storm chooses your enemies. That storm has a time of year. You might call it my season of chaos. It has a soundtrack, a smell, a country of memory. You will not vote it out. You must court it. This is the suspense that Jung builds in the room. What if the enemy is not your weak will, but your refusal to negotiate with the unconscious? What if the change you say you want requires you to become larger than the person who wants it? What if your past is not past, but a living population inside you that has been denied citizenship? The conflict is real. The standoff in the psyche is as tense as any war. There are wounds and medals, and ghost officers giving orders. When you fail, it is not just you failing. It is a faction regaining ground. When you succeed, another faction takes note. Without this awareness, you feel cursed. With it, you begin to see the outlines of the war, and for the first time, consider laying down arms long enough to talk. We keep suspense in our lives without knowing it. We arrange cliffhangers. If they do this one more time, I'm done. We write ultimatums we don't intend to enforce. We set deadlines. We count days sober. We hold our breath. Suspense is a way of keeping the drama high, so we don't have to confront the quiet. Jung believed the quiet is where the real shift happens. The confrontation with the shadow is conducted in whispers, not speeches. The pact with our neglected energy is sealed in images that rise in solitude, not in social media declarations. If drama is a way of keeping the center empty, then peace, true peace, the kind that ends a war, is the decision to sit in the center so the sides have to come to you. All of this is very noble until it touches real terror. You may have built a life on a persona that kept you alive. You may feel the trembling that comes when you even imagine putting it down. The psyche isn't cruel. It accounts for this. There is a reason Jung used the language of initiation and alchemy. In alchemy, lead becomes gold by surviving intense stages of decay and recombination. In initiation, the old identity dies so the new one can be born. If you go in pretending you can keep everything you've accumulated, you will leave with exactly what you walked in with. your collection of beautiful explanations for why nothing changes. Here's the turn nobody wants. Change begins the moment you stop trying to be better and start trying to be whole. Jung's entire psychology could be summarized by that sentence. The ego's project is improvement, more skills, better habits, higher mood, a stronger brand of self. The psyche's project is integration, bringing home what has been lost, owning what has been denied, reconciling the opposites that split you. Improvement without integration is decoration. Integration without improvement is collapse. We need both. But the order matters. When you think you can change by performance, you strengthen the persona. You might become impressive, admired, enviable. You might also become increasingly brittle. Why? Because what you repress becomes your fate. The pushed down returns. The unlived seeks a life. The shadow devours the careful garden. Or, if you are lucky, merely shames you in public and forces you to admit what you are. If you see this as punishment, you will hide deeper. If you see it as justice, you will confess and begin. Jung spoke often of individuation, a word that sounds like isolation, but is actually the opposite. It means becoming your particular self, the one who contains contradictions, who refuses to be reduced to a label, who makes a friendship between the figures that used to try to kill one another inside you. Individuation is not the path of becoming special. It is the path of becoming specific. And specificity is costly, because it requires letting go of generic goodness. Jung believed that we are obsessed with being good because it keeps us from being whole. Whole people frighten societies built on one-sided virtues. Whole people end up saying yes to things the culture forbids and no to things that everyone else finds normal. They are difficult to manage, but they are the ones who actually change. If the shadow is the first threshold, the second is the inner opposite. The anima in a man, the animus in a woman, terms Jung used to describe the contrasexual archetype. You can feel these figures at work in your moods and judgments. They criticize, inspire, seduce, sabotage. When they are autonomous and unconscious, they distort relationships. Men searching for goddesses in humans, women searching for prophets in flawed men. Men possessed by moods they can't articulate, women possessed by arguments that do not end. When these figures are made conscious, befriended, argued with, listened to, the outer search calms. We stop demanding that partners embody our inner gods. We learn to speak across the divide in ourselves. This is not romantic. It is pragmatic. It makes life possible. There is also a third figure, the self, the organizing center Jung distinguished from the ego. You don't command the self. You orbit it. You notice its hints. Dreams that repeat, numbers that insist, events that cluster with a strange meaning you can feel, but cannot explain, a phenomenon Jung called synchronicity, the causal connection through meaning. If you take this as magical thinking, you miss the point. The psyche speaks in pattern. When your life reveals a pattern that your rational mind did not stage, the modest response is curiosity. What is my life aiming me toward? When you cooperate, the energy long trapped in loops is released. When you refuse, the loops double down. All of this sounds like philosophy until it arrives in your body. Change is not only a reconsideration, but a reallocation of energy. Complexes steal energy. Persona leaks it. Shadow hoards it. The act of integrating returns you to power without theatrics. You feel less preyed upon by your habits. You feel less bewitched by your triggers. You stand in the same room with the same people, and the oxygen level changes. The choice you didn't have is now there, not because you became a different species, but because you resurfaced a part of you that had been underwater for years. Yet, Jung would warn, insight is not enough. Conscious realization must be accompanied by action that embodies the new relation. Otherwise, the old gods return, offended at being made into thoughts. You might admit, in tears, that your life has been spent rescinding yourself. Then you go home and pick up the phone and decline the old obligation. You might accept that your anger is not evil, but a signal of necessary boundary. Then you draw that boundary, and when the old chorus sings guilt in your ear, you keep the line anyway. You might confess that the person you love is a projection of your inner myth. Then you meet them as a person for the first time, and you endure the boredom and beauty of that reality. The psyche takes note. Doors open that were not previously available. We often imagine that revelation changes us like a lightning strike. More often, revelation is a dawn. The shape of the world emerges gradually. You can still change your mind. You can fall back asleep. In Jung's language, you must hold the tension of opposites long enough for a third thing to appear. This is a hard practice in a culture of immediate decisions. It means not rushing to label your anger as toxic or holy. It means letting your fear speak without handing it the keys. It means accepting that two contradictory truths can be equally yours until something deeper arranges them. People don't change because they cannot bear the tension. They evacuate to certainty. They go back to the old slogans. They stop the process at the most important hour. Jung loved alchemical images because they depict this uncertainty. In alchemy, the nigredo is the darkening, the rot, the putrefaction that begins the work. Then the albedo, a washing, a whitening, a sudden clarity that feels like grace. Then the citronides, a yellowing, the dawn sun, a consolidation of insight. Finally, the rubedo, the reddening, the embodied life of the gold. These are not ingredients. They are moods of the soul. If you demand gold on day one, you get counterfeit coins. If you insist on bypassing the nigredo, you become a hollow brightness that collapses at first contact with real life. Jung's brutal truth is that most people bail in the nigredo. They want the new life, but without decomposition. They want the phoenix without being ash. Life does not bargain with that. And yet, beneath this severity, he was a champion of mercy. He believed that the psyche aims at wholeness, that it cooperates when we stop pretending. He saw again and again that when a person finally turns to face what they have been chasing away, the dream life comes closer. The symptoms change shape, opportunities appear as if the world had been waiting. He did not think this was magic. He thought this was participation. The interior and exterior reflect one another when the center shifts. Here is the reframe. The part of you that resists change is not a demon to be cast out, but a god to be consulted. It learned its craft to protect a smaller, endangered you. It knows where the bones are buried. If you move too fast, if you treat it as an enemy, it will wreck your plans to save your life. If you treat it as a partner respecting its caution, asking its history, it may relent. It may even help. Active imagination, Jung's practice of dialoguing with these figures, was born of this respect. You sit, you let the image come. You describe it, you do not edit it. You speak to it and listen. You feel ridiculous and keep going. Something shifts. The critic gets a job. The protector gets a seat at the table. The saboteur explains what he's been preventing. You leave the session not with a pep talk, but with a treaty. You can call this fantasy if you need to. The psyche has been called worse. But the results are sober. Different choices, fewer wars inside, less compulsion to repeat. The revelation is that you didn't need to become someone else. You needed to become all of you. That is not romantic. It is expensive. It costs your innocence, your glamour, your excuses. It also gives you back your time. What does it feel like to stop refusing yourself? It feels like grief, not just for what happened, but for the life you did not live while you were surviving. Jung said, the way old men say dangerous things softly, that the greatest burden a child bears is the unlived life of the parents. He meant that we inherit missions we didn't choose, debts without paper, maps that end in swamps. We spend our 20s and 30s paying against these invisible balances, trying to overachieve the sadness, to underfeel the anger, to be the one who finally makes the family story end well. Then something breaks. A divorce, a layoff, a diagnosis, a quiet despair that looks like nothing from the outside. The autopilot dies. For a while you fall. In that fall, you realize how many of your virtues were armors, how much of your kindness was fear of abandonment, how much of your ambition was terror of being seen without a trophy, how much of your selflessness was a refusal to have a self. These are not accusations. They are anatomical drawings. You cannot cut away your armor with a heroic knife. You lower it, piece by piece, and every piece reveals a raw patch that needs warmth. You'll be tempted to make speeches about authenticity. Don't. The psyche listens for temperature, not words. Keep your hand on the rawness until it stops shaking at your touch. And then, astonishingly, something like a person begins to assemble in the wreckage. Not the person your parents advertised on your behalf. Not the person your achievement-addicted world pitched you. Not the person your past told you was safe. A quieter one. Someone who says yes and means it, no and means it. Someone who leaves the party when their body leaves the party. Someone who stops arguing with ghosts. This person has fewer friends and deeper ones. They disappoint people who miss the old performance. They confuse people who thought they knew your one sentence. They spend money differently. They waste time in a way that looks like prayer. They become allergic to manipulation, including their own. Jung thought that the soul bends toward the larger life, even through detours that look like disasters. He trusted dreams and decay, symbols and seasons, more than he trusted slogans. He looked at a person's worst week and asked, "What is being born through this?" He refused the easy cynicism that says we are our wounds. He also refused the cheap optimism that says we can outthink our wounds. He walked the narrow road that says we can carry our wounds and become beautiful in how we carry them. Fear doesn't disappear on this road. It redistributes. You will fear the right things. Not the email, not the silence after the boundary, not the withdrawal of approval. You will fear the temptation to go back. You will fear the offer that would return you to the old economy where you bought belonging with some essential part of you. You will fear deeply the sentence that ends the life you no longer want, but know too well. Say it anyway. Say it cleanly. The world may not clap, but the animals in the forest will stop moving and listen. Something in you will say, finally, there is cosmic terror here too. You begin to suspect that your life is not random, that you are accompanied by patterns ancient and intimate that have been trying to speak to you since childhood. You see the way the same numbers appear, the way that one image recurs, the way the timing of meetings feels choreographed by a hand that isn't yours. You can ignore this and call it apophenia. You can worship it and lose your footing. Or you can take it as poetic, as a way the world rhymes when you are paying attention. Jung called it synchronicity. He never asked you to build a doctrine out of it. He asked you to let it argue against your isolation. Change is not a movie where the montage earns the triumph. It is a season of mud. The ground sucks at your boots. Your friends on the sidewalk shout advice, and you love them and you go on. There will be days when nothing moves, and you will think you made a sentimental mistake. There will be nights when everything floods, and you will think you are dying. In these hours, Jung would hand you two tools: respect for the symbol and respect for ritual. Draw the dream without interpreting it. Light a candle and speak to the version of you who is not impressed by your panic. Write a letter to the one you used to be and thank them for keeping you alive. Do small things with devotion. The psyche is an old creature. It recognizes ceremony. If you grew up in a house where there were no ceremonies, where feeling was either indulgence or war, you will have to teach yourself how to be witnessed by yourself. This sounds like a lonely sentence. It is the opposite. It is the end of your loneliness. To witness yourself is to stop outsourcing your existence. It is to stop needing applause to know you said something true. It is to stop needing war to know you are alive. It is to grant your life the tenderness you begged from everyone else, and even when they gave it, could not absorb, because you were not home to receive it. There is a moment in every real change when you want to apologize to everyone who knew you before. Resist. They didn't know you. You didn't know you. You owe no one the performance of continuity. If your life is honest, it will look like a series of deaths and births. It will confuse the census. Jung would shrug at the confusion. He would ask whether you belong to your own life now. He would ask whether the figures in your dreams have stopped screaming. It is not all grave. When the shadow becomes a companion instead of a saboteur, the world gains color. You laugh in ways you haven't since childhood. You taste food. Music takes off your mask. You are less in a hurry to be the person you would admire, more interested in the person who can sit by a river and not need to post it. You begin to make decisively small decisions that protect the conditions under which you come alive. You learn the names of your own seasons. The month when you cannot be social without becoming cruel. The week when you must move your body like a prayer. The afternoons when the inner critic gets loud and needs a sandwich. This isn't indulgence. It's intelligent self-government. The brutal truth becomes a quieter one. People don't change because they're bad or weak. They don't change because they treat their life like an argument to be won instead of a mystery to be entered. The argument requires proof and victory. The mystery requires consent. Consent to not knowing how your life will look without the old scaffolding. Consent to break your heart. Consent to be seen as a different person by those who only recognized your mask. Consent to the small, daily acts of allegiance to your soul that will never be trending. This is not cruelty. It is fidelity. Stand in a dim room. Imagine the versions of you gathered in a loose circle, the obedient one with straight shoulders, the rebel with burned fingertips, the caretaker holding everyone else's water, the critic with teeth like glass, the sensual one who is never allowed to dance in daylight, the child who learned to listen at doors to survive. They don't look at one another. They look at you. They are waiting for a sentence that nobody else can say to them. Something like, "I will not sell you to buy belonging." Something like, "You belong to this life even when I am afraid." Something like, "We go together from now on." If you say it and mean it, the air changes. It doesn't solve your mortgage or erase your enemies. It makes you audible to yourself, and that is the beginning of a different fate. Jung wrote that what remains unconscious will direct your life, and you will call it fate, not as a threat, but as a map. If you want a different fate, turn toward what you don't know. Start with the tiniest acts of rebellion against the old arrangements. Tell the truth once where you used to soften it. Decline a role you used to accept automatically. Let one dream matter for a week. Risk one silence where you would have explained yourself. People think change is an epic. Sometimes it is a sentence that changes which God you serve. The great seduction now will be to imagine yourself finished, to make your new clarity into a brand, to turn your treaty with the shadow into a flag you wave at dinner. Don't. The psyche hates colonialism. If you turn your inner work into propaganda, the old gods will rise and take back the land in a night. Stay poor in spirit. Stay close to the ground. Let yourself be corrected by dreams and accidents and the hard edges of reality. Grow a sense of humor about your pieties. Laugh when you catch yourself announcing your wholeness. It will keep you from becoming a tyrant in the temple you just made hospitable. You will lose people, not because you became cruel, but because the story changed genres and some characters only belong to the earlier chapters. Let them go with ritual. Light something. Pray in whatever language your bones remember. Thank them for what they were in the smaller house. Bless them to find their own doors. Keep the door unlatched for those who return without demanding the old performance. Your heart is not a museum. It is a living space. Don't fill it with exhibits of who you were. There is a deeper challenge that will find you later when the first victory laps are over. The challenge is to love the parts of you that stayed in the basement, even after you opened all the doors. Some parts don't trust you yet. They have reasons. They remember the years when you starved them to earn praise. They remember the costs. They will come upstairs slowly, in inconvenient moods. They will test you. Pass the tests. Feed them. Let them be awkward in the kitchen. Teach them to speak in the new house rules. This is the quiet work of years. This is the work that keeps you from needing a crisis to remind you that you are alive. And a final warning, because Jung would give you one. The larger life does not protect you from pain. It makes pain meaningful. It also enlarges joy until it becomes almost unbearable. You will stand sometimes in the middle of your day, doing nothing extraordinary, and feel a pressure behind your eyes that is not sadness and not fear, but the strangeness of being exactly where you belong, while knowing it can all be taken. Don't look away. That's the pulse of the self. That's the rhythm you hid from when your life was smaller. Let it have you. You cannot control it. You can only consent. If there is a choice between being good and being whole, choose whole. Good changes with the fashions, and is often the name the frightened give to obedience. Wholeness is older than law. It makes you useful in times that need fewer performers and more elders. It will make you, in small ways, a stranger to your culture and a home to your friends. You will carry stories instead of slogans. You will offer attention instead of advice. You will have the capacity to stand beside someone in their negredo without insisting on turning on the lights. In a burning world, this is the gift. And if none of this convinces you, if nothing in you wants to descend into your own house, consider the alternative. Consider living the same year on repeat until your body quits. Consider letting your most faithful gods die nameless in the dark. Consider becoming a cautionary tale told by the people who needed you to stay small to feel safe. If that sounds like an acceptable plot, you will not change. If it sounds like a betrayal too deep to bear, you already have. We end where we began, with the refusal that becomes a covenant. Refuse to live at the mercy of patterns you won't name. Refuse the comfort of despising what is yours to integrate. Refuse the superstition that a better schedule will save you from a truer life. Begin, instead, to make a relationship with the figures you sent into exile. Bring them water. Bring them work. Bring them into your days. If this opened your eyes, subscribe to Boring History, because the truth is never boring.